Ethereum Classic is the original Ethereum blockchain until in 2016 when a DAO or decentralized autonomous organization was hacked and $50 million was stolen. This caused Ethereum to hard fork and split into Ethereum Classic and the Ethereum we know today.
The difference between a hard fork and a soft fork is basically that in a soft fork, blocks that were any block that's valid under the new rules was still valid under the old rules. So if you have a client that verifies according to the old rules, then you'll still be able to accept the chain that follows the new rules. Whereas with a hard fork, like you have to update your code in order to stay on the chain.
This contentious decision to hard fork Ethereum showed that if a bug in their code is exploited, drastic measures would be taken. When Ethereum merges to proof of stake, this opens up the door for a variety of different forking attacks.
In proof of stake, like you can just go in and change 2 or 3 lines of code. You can kind of insert yourself as a validator or something. So the point here is that the cost of forks is very, very cheap in proof of stake. If you make it that easy and cheap to fork, a lot of this is like we just don't know how this will play out in reality because it hasn't been around very long.
Yeah.
But I would argue that one of the reasons we've seen so few forks in like Bitcoin and Ethereum to date is because doing it in a proof of work world is expensive. In proof of stake, the process of actually constructing a chain is costless in and of itself, right? Assuming you have the required keys. In other words, that you're like in the validator set. And so any validator from any point in the history of the chain or any sort of set of validators can construct an alternative chain basically for free. This particular form of attack is called a long-range attack.
So it just becomes a new token.
Totally new everything. In the case of Ethereum, it's a total state fork. So everything on Ethereum would exist on both chains.
The way to combat this type of forking attack is through a concept called slashing.
For many kinds of attacks that you do against this network, we have this concept of like automatic slashing, right? Which basically means that in order to like revert a finalized block, so if there's one block that's like accepted by the network and you try to convince the network to kind of revert that block and accept a different block, in order to make that kind of attack, you basically have to have your validator, like a big portion of your validators signed to conflicting messages. And this is something that like once these messages are on the network, like you can go and prove, like, look, these people did it. And so we have this feature in the protocol called slashing, where you basically take all these people who provably misbehaved and you burn their coins. This isn't like, a human going in and saying, I don't like you, I don't like you, I don't like you. This is like automated, right? You can
So the slashing process is automated.
Yes.
Is there ways it can go wrong? So that's a painful process where the coins are burned.
It is painful, yes. I think the one big unknown, of course, is like if an attack actually happens, and like if an attack happens that requires the community to actually choose one of these minority forks, then like what would the community actually successfully coordinating on this look like, right? Like it's like we can talk about it and we can write like science fiction novels about it, but like until it's happened, you don't really know the details of like what it looks like and how difficult it is.
So if you have been online the whole time, right? You're running your validator, you're on a strong internet connection, you're very responsible, you upgrade it, you keep it running, you're fine, right? If someone presents you an alternative chain, you're going to look at it and say, well, no, this is not. Like, I know what the real chain is. The problem is, let's say that you start your thing up and you turn it off for some period of time. Who knows what that reason is. Maybe you're in a part of the world where you have metered access to electricity or something, right? You turn the thing back on and now you have sort of two peers who send you like two competing chains. You can't determine in the same objective fashion which of those chains is the right chain or the longest chain, like you can with proof of work. So you have this, so Ethereum people call this weak subjectivity. You have this certain degree of subjectivity. It's trust is what it boils down to. You have to trust some peer or some subset of peers. In the case of Ethereum, this means you're trusting someone like an Etherscan or something, right? To kind of tell you this is the right chain.
In order to know that you are on the correct chain, it requires some degree of trust. While there are consequences to malicious validators that try to fork the network, this concept of automatic slashing can go wrong. Having a decentralized community try to determine the correct valid chain would be difficult to say the least. So there needs to be a trusted source so users can verify that they are on the right chain, and one of those centralized sources is Infura. Infura provides the necessary tools and infrastructure for developers to launch their applications on the Ethereum blockchain. At one point, almost half of all applications use Infura.
So I think first of all, the Ethereum network is not reliant on Infura. Like if Infura died tomorrow, the Ethereum network would keep going, and everyone who does have either an Ethereum full node or an Ethereum light node would still continue kind of functioning normally. Ethereum applications would definitely get significantly harder to use, though at the same time, like it is possible to use Ethereum applications without relying on Infura, right? Like I think in MetaMask, it's possible to kind of switch the endpoint to a local node. These are definitely things that we can try to do better, and there's very active efforts at trying to do better at this. Like there's a lot of ongoing efforts at trying to create a more decentralized backend for kind of something like MetaMask, for example. But like if you want to, you could definitely hook it up to kind of your full node or even your light node.
I have a friend that runs a crypto exchange, and he said if Infura gets hacked, Ethereum is dead, because that's the source of truth for everybody.
I don't know. I mean, I've definitely sent
You should know
a lot
that.
of payments out of my Netherminds node. So,
So do you have a full archival node?
I do not have an archival node. I have a full Nethermind node.
To a certain degree, Ethereum is reliant on these centralized sources like Infura. This leads into another problem, because when the merge to proof of stake happens, there needs to be a trusted source to verify the past history of Ethereum for clients who want to be fully synced with the new chain.
The new chain is not going to hold information from what happened in the Ethereum chain before the merge, right? So like Ethereum clients of the that people are going to use like around the time of the merge and soon after the merge, they're probably just going to sync and check the proof of work chain up to the merge, and then they're going to check the proof of stake chain. We stop requiring all nodes to store all of these historical blocks. Instead, clients stop storing history that's more than 1 year old, and we kind of shift the responsibility of storing and retrieving that history to other protocols. So I think the interesting question there is, if all client nodes do not have to store history anymore, then who does, right? There are applications that depend on history that are more than 1 year old. I mean, even rollups do, right? A lot of like applications depend on old history to tell you about like all instances of when you use that application. So like I'm not sure exactly how like DAI and Ryan, all these things work, but like maybe you need to scan the history to tell you what all your CDPs are. If like I know Augur needed to use like historical logs to tell you like all of the different markets that you've participated in. So there is a lot of value in history for at least some applications. And so there's this interesting question of like, well, what are these alternative ways of getting history, right? If you care about some account or some application that got moved into the expired tree, you can go and provide the Merkle proofs and you can revive it. Right, so state expiry does not impose on anyone like a risk of, their coins getting deleted if they accidentally go into a cave for 2 years. Like, if you go into a cave for 2 years, then you're just going to have to provide the Merkle proofs to recover your coins, right? Which is something that you totally can do, but in order to do that, like you're not going to be able to just go through the regular Ethereum protocol. You're going to have to like talk to the Portal network or talk to the Graph or talk to a block explorer or talk to one of these other people in order to actually get that data.
There are significant risks to not storing past Ethereum history on the main chain and relying on other people to keep that data.
People are gonna like get tired of like all of this data, and you're gonna have an accident at some point, and you're gonna realize that like some piece of data from somewhere in history, nobody is storing it anymore. The Ethereum base protocol will stop forcing every node to store all of history, but instead there's like this entire array of alternative solutions, centralized solutions like block explorers, the Portal network, the Graph, and even more protocols that I've forgotten about.
Clients of Ethereum will have to be reliant on centralized sources if they want to get any of this past history. Another way Ethereum can start to become centralized is through a concept called MEV.
Okay, MEV, minor extractable value. It is not different in proof of work and proof of stake, right? So like if you want to call it, block proposer extractable value, like it sounds less sexy, but we can call it BPEV instead of MEV, who cares? But
so this is a problem in both proof of work and proof of stake.
Yes. So the basic idea is that if you have the ability to choose which transactions go into a block and in what order, then you have the ability to like take advantage of that position for economic gain in a lot more ways than just collecting transaction fees, right? Like for example, there's decentralized exchanges on chain like Uniswap. And like let's say the price of ETH versus USDC was 2700 the previous block, but then there was a bit of a market drop and now it's 2680, where you can go on Uniswap and you can just like gobble up the entire part of the automated order book that's like between 2700 and 2680, right? And then at the same time you like run a bot and you buy some ETH back at 2680 and you've just like made about $10 of profit, right? So or well, $10 times whatever the depth is, right? So there's lots of little things like that. There's also things that involve like front running other people's transactions. So one example of this would be that if someone sends a transaction that says, like, I don't know, buy me 5 ETH for whatever price that you can get, but with a maximum of let's say $15,000, then you can go and like you can put a transaction right in front of that transaction, and you can like buy up that ETH first, and then you resell it to him at $15,000 minus one.
And then you get to make a little bit of money that way.
Exactly. So there's a lot of these different like arbitrage, front running, back running, these different tricks that allow block proposers to
get some percentage on top, like overhead.
Exactly. And the reason why this is a challenge is because first of all, it sometimes degrades user experience because users get less favorable trades. But there are sometimes ways to like mitigate that for applications. Sometimes it's not that bad. But like the bigger risk that I think some people consider more existential is that there's just much more economies of scale in figuring out how to extract all this revenue. Right? Because if you're just collecting transaction fees, there aren't really economies of scale. There aren't really benefits to centralizing, right? Because it's a very simple formula. You just like grab up the transactions that pay you the most. But with MEV, there's all these sophisticated algorithms. And if you have lots of money, then you can hire really smart people to make amazing algorithms. And then you can use the other half of your money to get a lot of mining power or a lot of stake, and you get a lot of opportunities to use your even better algorithms. So there's this risk that like as a result of this, mining is basically or even validating proof of stake is going to centralize. Sometimes you can't just like make centralization go away. Sometimes it's inevitable, but at least you can try to kind of contain it. You can direct it, or you can even sort of firewall it away from core consensus, the parts that really do need to be decentralized.
But you don't see it as an existential risk. It's just a little. It's a bit of a problem that has to be constantly dealt with.
It's a risk. Like there's obviously a risk that it's a very severe problem, and that even this Flashbots approach has some fatal flaw or whatever. But I'm definitely we're definitely approaching it with the mindset of this is a problem, and like yes, we do have to do some work to solve it, but we're doing it, and so far it's being solved.
When Ethereum merges to proof of stake, it introduces a variety of different risk factors to the network. This includes the increased risk of forking attacks due to the reduced cost it takes to create a new chain on the network. While automatic slashing is a way to combat forking attacks, it is not a perfect solution and could go wrong if an attack actually does happen and the community needs to decide what the correct fork is. Due to this weak subjectivity of a proof-of-stake chain, centralized sources like Infura are relied upon so users can verify that they are on the correct chain. Centralized sources will also increasingly be relied upon when Ethereum merges to proof-of-stake due to history expiry. Finally, MEV will also start to cause Ethereum to become centralized, which can already be seen in the Lido staking pool, which controls over 25% of all staked ETH. Nevertheless, Vitalik and the Ethereum Foundation have decided merging to proof of stake is the best course of action to allow Ethereum to properly scale. However, this merge has proven to be quite difficult, and the core developers of Ethereum are facing serious challenges when trying to complete this transition.